Welcome back to the final verdict. So today we'll be covering another tragic murder case that occurred around 20 years ago. So this case was quite interesting since there were some varying opinions in the public. So does the name Andrea Yates ring a bell?
Yeah, I heard her during my psychology class.
So this would be a great case to talk about in psychology class. I mean, seeing like hallucinations and hearing voices, like that's kind of a pretty big sign of
A mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like hallucinations is one of the basic topics that we cover in psychology. So our psychology teacher, like our first project that we got was to cover the case of Andrea Yates. So she's kind of like a common case that we cover.
So before we talk about this case, have you ever heard of postpartum psychosis?
No.
So as you may or may not know, Andrea Yates suffered from a severe case of postpartum psychosis. So let's get into this case in more detail.
Yep.
Well, first of all, we should go over the background information on Andrea Yates. So when I was doing my research on this case, I was kind of shocked to see that she lived a normal life. And she was born on July 2nd, 1964 in Houston, Texas. And she was raised in a Roman Catholic family. And to my knowledge, had a pretty happy childhood. And she was even the high school class valedictorian.
Oh.
Yeah, but however, that would change one day.
How so?
Well, in 1990, she met this man named Russell or Rusty Yates, a NASA engineer. 3 years later, she got married to Rusty, and they lived in a house in Houston, but later moved into a travel trailer or like a bus.
And so what led to the crime?
So during the Yates marriage, Andrea's mental state was deteriorating, and after the birth of her first child, she claimed that she would see Satan and images of death, and she would have hallucinations involving stabbing. Not only that, she started to isolate herself, becoming extremely thin, and she became obsessed with something called fundamentalist Christianity.
That's like, what is that?
So she was obsessed, like specifically obsessed with a fundamentalist preacher, and he would say things like hell is right on the doorstep waiting to bring you in, and how parents are responsible for the salvation of their children.
Oh.
Yeah. So he would go as far as to say that parents should just commit suicide or rather than let their children stumble and go to hell.
That's weird.
So as time went on, Andrea Yates would have more children. So she attempted to take her life on June 17, 1999, after the birth of her fourth child by overdosing. And she was taken into a psychiatric unit to be treated and was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And she was released with medication for her to take, but she chose not to take them. Actually, she was discharged before her symptoms got better because of her insurance company. It limited the days of inpatient care that it paid for, so Yates would continue to see hallucinations and even stop feeding her children.
So it was mostly just for the money.
The insurance company wouldn't pay for that.
That's sad.
Yeah. So she would hear voices to get a knife, and she began to harm herself. And she attempted a second suicide attempt and was hospitalized after going into catatonic state, meaning she was very unresponsive to the environment around her. And so doctors warned her that if she had more children, her health would be at risk.
So she eventually stopped having children?
So that's the thing. Even hearing this warning, at this point they had 4 children.
Yeah.
They still decided to have the 5th child.
Yeah. Wow.
So this, again, probably was a turning point because her health was at risk. But another turning point was actually at the end of February 2001. So Andrea Yates had a father that she would take care of because her father was suffering from Alzheimer's. And at the end of February 2001, he actually passed away.
That's sad.
Yeah. So after this event happened, she totally distanced herself from everything. She stopped talking, drinking, nursing the baby, and she even began pulling her hair out, pulling out her hair. And she would think there were cameras watching her, and on the TV, like cartoon characters would talk to her.
Oh.
Yeah, so she was admitted to the hospital again for the third time, and she restarted on her antipsychotic drug therapy. And after 10 days of staying at the hospital, she was discharged. So she was still depressed and mute, but she began to eat and sleep more, so she was kind of getting better, I think.
But hearing that she thought that cartoon characters were talking to her kind of makes me feel that she was having like a disorder that was getting serious.
Yeah. But that's not even like the end of her strange like behaviors or strange like hallucinations.
Oh.
So after being discharged from the hospital, she just like began acting stranger. And for example, she would fill up the bathtub and she would say like that she was just doing this just in case because she said that she needed it. And she was sent to the hospital again because of the strange behaviors. And the psychiatrist weaned her off the drug therapy, but Andrea just began to get worse. So Rusty, her husband, asked the psychiatrist to just start the drug therapy again. But the psychiatrist actually refused, and the psychiatrist told Andrea to just think positive thoughts.
That's kind of off.
So the crazy part is that 2 days after this meeting with the psychiatrist, she took her children one by one to her room to drown them.
So like her just in case of filling up the bathtub was all for this.
Yeah, so she drowned all 5 of her children in the bathtub. Then this part gave me kind of like the chills. She calmly called the police to request an officer and then called her husband to come home.
That's like really, really weird.
So I think one of the most shocking things from my research was the response that the psychiatrist had. I mean, like more than one of Andrea's doctors said that she is the sickest person or one of the sickest that they have ever seen.
Yeah.
So she was diagnosed with postnatal psychosis, major depression, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, and combinations of these disorders. However, postnatal psychosis was the most agreed to.
Yeah.
And actually, postnatal disorder or postpartum psychosis is very common. After birth. 10 to 15% of women just feel short-lasting baby blues or postnatal depression. Psychosis, which is Andrea Yates' case, affects only 1 or 2 of every 1,000 women after birth. So, yeah, it's pretty rare. This must be recognized early for treatment, though. And Margaret Spinelli, a psychiatrist, describes the condition as predictable, identifiable, treatable, and preventable.
Okay, so the whole disease or the disorder she had was able to be treated the whole time, but like they missed it, which made it get like worser the whole time. Oh, that's kind of sad.
I guess it's also because her case is rare, kind of, but it's still like unfortunate that she was not able to get the care that she deserved. And the legal actions or outcome is another long story. So she was charged with capital murder for the drowning of her children.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, she called the police to send an officer to her house.
Yep.
But so she actually gave a detailed like confession to the police. And she claimed that she killed her children to save them from like going to hell, showing her obsession for the fundamentalist like Christianity beliefs.
Yeah.
And numerous psychiatrists actually testified that she was mentally ill and in a state of like a psychotic state during the murder of her children. But Park Yates, a California psychiatrist and prosecution witness, actually went against it, saying that she knew what she was doing and she knew that it was wrong. Like he mentioned that she said that Satan had ordered her to do it, and the only reason why she did this murder was because of like intrusive thoughts. He even brought up like a episode that aired a TV show called Law and Order, in which a woman killed her children by drowning. So he claimed that she got this idea from the TV.
Oh.
Yeah, so She was convicted for the deaths of 3 of her children and sentenced to life in prison on March 15th, 2002. And in jail, she admitted that she considered killing the children for 2 years. And she said that she had been a bad mother and claimed that she was marked by Satan and the only way to save them was to kill them.
It's like, I'm kind of sad for her how like she totally got like the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And I feel like she didn't have enough education, or she was like less aware of the fact that she had postpartum psychosis. Because as you mentioned earlier, this disorder was treatable, but she couldn't get enough treatment. She didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So I think she was just suffering so much without knowing like how her situation was.
Yeah. Like she said that when the state punished her for her crime, Satan himself would be destroyed. So I think she thought that this was the right thing to do. She was rescuing her children.
Because technically nobody told her like what was happening to her.
So even in jail, she would see hallucinations of satanic teddy bears and ducks. And like obviously that's like a sign of like a mental illness or a disorder, but she herself claimed that she was not mentally ill and she was never depressed because she never cried.
Because like the major image of having depression is that many people think if you have depression you cry a lot, but actually I also kind of searched about depression a long time ago and I figured out people who have major depression issues don't like cry all the time. So if you weren't aware of what depression was actually like, what it does, then I think she might have thought like that.
Yeah. So it's really sad that she was not aware of her own situation. Like she has to suffer through that. But in early 2005, they actually reversed her conviction. So Yates' testimony was found to be incorrect. The episode that he mentioned about the drowning of the children was never actually aired. So due to this, a new trial was ordered. So on January 9th of 2006, Yates pleaded not guilty due to by reason of insanity, and the jury of 6 men and 6 women found her not guilty by reason of insanity. So Yates underwent several months of evaluation and was assigned to Kerrville State Hospital, a mental health facility, for treatment in January 2007.
It's kind of surprising that one of the juries gave evidence of an episode that was never actually there. And it's also funny of how people believed in the episode that never existed. But I'm also happy that she could finally go to like a proper hospital and get mental health recovered.
So nice. Actually, this case was used to spread awareness to prevent a similar crime. So professional communities were able to establish the Yates Children Memorial Fund to educate the public about issues that affect women's mental health. So in addition, in 2003, the Texas state legislature passed the Andrea Yates bill, and this requires all providers of prenatal care to give new mothers info on resources that are available to them when they suffer from postnatal depression.
That's actually great to hear.
However, there were some controversies like in this case. While I was researching, I saw many different perspectives of like people just like commenting on the case or people involved in this case. So people were hating a lot on Andrea Yates because they couldn't believe how gruesome and how evil she can be towards her children. And some even blame Rusty Yates because they claim that Rusty abused Andrea by having so many children, like forcing her, and they just ignored the warnings from the doctor. And they say that he should be considered part of the children's deaths. Like he should also be part of like that case. However, Rusty himself blamed the deaths on the poor medical care and the insurance companies for not being able to take care of Andrea Yates properly. And he actually supported his wife, but divorced her in March of 2005. And the Yates family, Andrea Yates family, blamed Rusty for her mental deterioration.
So as a whole, everybody was like kind of blaming
Mhm.
each other of what happened to
Yeah.
Yates and her children.
Yeah.
I think that it's not only one person to blame for this case, but everything actually got built up
Yeah.
that made this whole big incident happen.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. But I'm so glad that this case was actually like able to spread awareness instead of like focusing just on the negative part.
yeah.
It can be used for kind of like a positive thing.
Yeah, because you also mentioned about how like the mental hospital systems got better and stuff like that. So I think that was a positive part of this whole case as a whole. But so as a summary, what was the final verdict?
So at first, Andrea Yates was convicted of capital murder, but spared the death penalty, and she was sentenced to life in prison. However, due to the testimony being incorrect, like they thought that the juries could have been biased, so they ordered a new trial. And in the end, Andrea Yates was proven not guilty due to insanity and was admitted to the hospital for treatment. So she did not go to jail.
So to be honest, I don't really know how to feel because there were so many opinions to this case, and the conclusions or the result to the case was switched. But I just feel that everything could have been prevented if Andrea Yates could have just gotten the perfect treatment. She could
more
have
resources
when like her disorder was not that serious. Because nowadays, as everything gets better as a whole, if there was this kind of person, she would have gotten like
proper treatment.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of unfortunate to hear.
I think I agree. Like, I kind of have mixed feelings because, of course, I can't forgive her for her crime.
Yeah.
But still, she still suffered, and it was due to like a disorder. I think she couldn't really control it. Yeah.
So I kind of feel sorry for almost everyone in the case where like for the children, of course, because they died because of the mother. Andrea Yates, I also feel sorry for her because she just couldn't get the proper treatment where she could know that she had this disorder. So like in jail, she thought she was innocent.
Yeah.
And also for Rusty as well, because as a husband, he like sent Andrea Yates to the hospital, but there were times where the hospital refused to give her treatment.
Exactly.
So I think it was like a really interesting case to hear as a whole, and I'm also excited for the next case as well.
So am I.
So until next time, this was the final verdict.